Welcome to Around the Writer's Table, a podcast focusing on the crossroads of creativity, craft, and conscious living for writers of all ages and backgrounds. Your hosts are Gina, Melody, and Kimbu, three close friends and women of a certain age who bring to the table their eclectic backgrounds and unique perspectives on the trials, tribulations, and the joys of writing. So pull up a chair and get comfortable here around the writer's table.
Welcome back, listeners. This is Kimbu York here with Around the Writer's Table podcast. We're on episode 42, which always boggles my mind whenever I talk about what episode we're on. We've been doing this for a while, y'all. And today is the start of an amazing turning point for us. We are at the end of the Creative Quest guidepost series, and Gina is looking very mixed feelings about that as I look at her as we're recording this, but we will be getting onto that. It is called, this particular guidepost is called Yielding to Mastery. It's going to be very interesting, and we're going to talk a lot about it. But first, for new listeners or maybe people with bad memories like me, I am Kimbu York. I am a novelist and a productivity coach for authors. I love writing, talking about writing, and helping other writers write. I also run the 1 Million Words Club, which is a membership community for authors focused on accountability, support, and encouragement. And that is me. And of course, I'm here with my co-host. Let's go over to Melody A. Scout. Go ahead and tell the listeners who you are, my friend.
Welcome back, listeners. I'm Melody, a scout, and I help my clients find their sense of home by restoring balance and harmony to their lives through plant spirit medicine and my book, Soul of the Seasons, Creating Balance, Resilience, and Connection by Tapping the Wisdom of the Natural World, available at most major online bookstores.
And you're also working on a historical fiction novel, right? Yeah?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the reminder.
We all have to remind each other of these things. It's wild. But speaking of Gina, historical fiction author, star of the show, tell everybody about yourself a little bit, then we'll get into the topic.
Hi, ladies. It's always great to be here, and welcome, listeners. I'm Gina Hogan Edwards, and yes, I'm working on a historical fiction novel. Well into it. It's one of those things that has been in my heart for a long time, and these characters will not leave me alone. So eventually it's going to get done. I am also a creativity coach and editor. Using that background, I host women's writing retreats called Story Camp, which I'm getting ready to depart for one of those in 2 weeks and have another one this fall. One of my most favorite things to do in the world. And so really my overall mission is just to create a safe space for women so that they can get words on the page.
And having been to Story Camp myself, let me just say I am extremely jealous that I am not joining you on this particular one because they're great, fantastic experiences. So go have fun, darn it. Just go.
I can second that. Having been to a couple of story camps does not disappoint any of our listeners or writer friends out there. I would say look for Gina's retreats in the future because you will come away a changed person and a changed writer.
That's so true. That's so true.
Thank
and
you.
We are focusing back on Gina's wisdom with this episode, Yielding to Mastery, which is the very final, or in the process. It's not the final, like you'll get into that, but it is the final one that we will be covering on this podcast, Yielding to Mastery. So Gina, I know you're probably going to go do a little bit of an overview of the Creative Quest and then get us into the topic. So I'm excited about hearing about this one.
Yes. So we have already in past episodes talked about the 10 stages of developing, reclaiming your creative voice in the creative journey. And I call this the Creativity Quest. We talked about the 9 stages. And then after each one of those episodes, we talked about that stage in terms of the writing process, framing it through the perspective of Melody's book, Soul of the Seasons, and the natural seasons of the writing process. So we've talked about, I won't go through every single one of these stages since they're covered deeply in past episodes, but we'll have a list in our show notes so that you can easily link back to those past episodes. But each one of the stages, the first letter spells out the word creativity. So we're now at Y, the 10th stage. Hard to believe.
It is.
As I've talked about and taught the stages, they've transformed somewhat. I've refined them based on both my experience and the experience of my clients. And in some cases, I've even renamed them, as some of the past listeners will know. So this stage I called in the past Your Essence Expressed, because I felt like it was a stage at which we really come into our voice. And that is true. But I am now calling this stage Yielding to Mastery, for several different reasons. I had someone ask me, "Don't you mean wielding mastery?" And I'm like, no. So wielding, if you look that up in the dictionary, has a very masculine type of definition. It's about exerting, commanding, handling, wrangling, that sort of thing. And I don't think that we really can do that in an effective way with this process that we call writing. I think it needs a little more gentleness sometimes. And so, yielding is about having some flexibility to lean into, is kind of how I look at it. And the word mastery is an interesting one that people sometimes have a little bit of trouble with, because it's often equated with, expertise and knowledge. And the point that I want to get across about this phase is that, sure, mastery can be you stepping into what you consider to be a mastery of the skill of writing, if you want to look at it that way, mastery of the process. But the thing about it is that you get to define what mastery means. And a conversation that I often have with writers is also about success, because mastery is often equated with success. And you, as the writer, get to define what success means for you. I work with writers who their intention is to use journaling to get to know themselves better. They have no intention to publish. They have no intention to share their writing with anyone. It is a process of self-development and self-fulfillment. I've worked with other writers who intended to self-publish, or who were submitting their books to agents and wanted to traditionally publish. And so the picture of what success or mastery looks like to you is in your command. It is what you decide that it's going to be. And we meet different levels of mastery throughout the creative process. So in the short term, mastery might look like finishing that novel.
Mm.
And finishing might look like writing the end, or it might look like seeing the thumbnail because you've posted it on Amazon for sale. You get to decide what that focus point, what that level of mastery looks like. And so yielding to mastery is a very gentle process, I think. And of course, we aspire to expertise, we aspire to success. But one of the things that I love most about the writing process is that there really is no end point. Unless, of course, you decide I'm going to write one novel and then I'm done. Of course, that would be considered an endpoint. But if you incorporate writing into your life on a regular basis, it's like there's always something else that we can do different. There's always something else we can learn, always something else we can do better, always another genre we can write in, always another different type of writing that we can do, or a different kind of writing experience we can have at a conference or a retreat. So the perpetuality, the long lastingness, if there is such a word, of this process is one of the things that attracts me to it, because I feel like it's something I'm going to live with for the rest of my life. And so defining different points of mastery along the way are important for me. And so I'm going to stop yammering, because I could, keep doing this forever and ever. You know how I get when I talk about these stages.
No, we have no idea, Gina. Like, complete loss. I would like to bring up an idea that I thought of while you were talking, because you were talking about people who just want to write for personal self-expression reasons. And of course we have examples of that. We have like Emily Dickinson, whose poems weren't revealed to the world until after she died. But it's interesting, because this is not an analogy I usually personally make, but it reminds me of amateur athletes. Like, nobody really questions that, say, an amateur runner or an amateur jogger ever gets anywhere. Like, they're not training for the Olympics. They're running for personal best. They're running for personal health reasons. They're running because they enjoy the process. And I'd love to see that applied more to writing and people who are writing, because I think in our field, our industry, as publishing industry and writing industry, we all tend to get focused on where are you going to get published, and are you going to publish that book, and are you going to do this, and are you going to do that? And success doesn't always mean that for some people. And I think it's unfair to put that kind of burden on people for whom that doesn't resonate. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. I think that is an excellent analogy. Um, Self-development, understanding ourselves can be um, an aim for our writing. And being able to understand ourselves better, mastering that is kind of like, I feel like that's why we're here on earth to begin with.
Well, yeah, and then like anything else, it can bleed over into other things. Like, if you are an amateur runner or an amateur athlete, that health will affect how you enjoy other things in life, right? And if you are an amateur author or an amateur writer, however you want to define it, that will affect your ability to read literature and interpret other things, and to write letters and to write emails or whatever. I think there's a lot more to yielding to mastery than just simply hitting a success bar that someone
Mhm.
has put down in front of you.
And in addition to, those things that it could bleed over into, I know from my own personal experience that when I journal, it gives me a place to put all of the bleh that's in my head.
It's so eloquent,
That
Gina.
Yes, thank you. Um, it gives me a place to put all that mush, all that mud that I then don't have to bring into, conversations with my husband, or, it doesn't have to bleed over into other areas of my life, because you guys have heard me say the quote from Joan Didion before, my very favorite quote in the whole world, which I put on my notebooks for the writing retreat. I write entirely to find out what I'm thinking, what I'm looking at, what I see, and what it means, what I want and what I fear. And I think that when we use writing for that purpose and get to know ourselves better, it makes us better people.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
So I have a question for you ladies.
Oh,
In
no.
terms of, yeah, of course, we always have these little question and answer sessions. So I would love to know a time when let me back up. I would love to know at this moment in time what you would define for yourself as mastery in the writing process.
Mhm.
And it can be big or small. It doesn't have to be like this huge, like life goal sort of thing. Like I said, when we approach mastery, there are different levels of that throughout our development as writers. And so how do you think of mastery in terms of your own writing process at this point? I'll kind of open that up for a little more flexibility. And if you have an example of like maybe when you felt that you had attained some mastery, who wants to go first? Volunteers, please.
Well, I can speak to that a little bit. I think I love the title that you've given to this step in the creativity quest. You know, yielding, to me, the word allowing keeps
Yes.
coming up. And that it's like an
Mm.
embracing. Um, Again, it's not a efforting or um, dominating, sort of activity, but you allow yourself to have this and own this experience. And the mastery is just so many layers to me because, you know, over the years of my writing experience, there's from very basic, oh, I learned to write with better grammar these days, and I don't use 1,000 commas, my writings like I used to, but also adding depth and strength and, each level I writing dialogue and, you know, showing, not telling, and all those levels have developed over time. And to own that, to allow that and sink that in, and that it is an ongoing process and not a landing place of
Mhm.
perfection, of idealized
Oh,
perfection.
yes. Yes. Oh, I love that. Not a landing place of idealized perfection. Whew. Yes.
Darn it.
Thank you for getting that, and thank you
Mhm,
for also recognizing the equivalency of the sort of yielding with allowing and owning,
mhm,
embracing it and letting it not just come to us, but letting ourselves be washed in
mhm,
that um, devotion that we've made to our writing that's helped us get better at it.
mhm. Like the first time that I said out loud to somebody, "I am a writer."
Mhm.
I mean, it
Mhm.
still gives me chills to say that, and that was about owning it for me. Other people
Mm.
called me that, but it took me a long time to own that.
I think that's the case for a lot of writers. It's
Yeah.
something that
Mhm,
even when we're living into it, sometimes we can't own it for one reason or another, and there are a lot of different reasons for that.
mhm.
So Kimbu, mastery, what does that look like? How does it feel?
It's certainly something, as I was thinking over while you were talking, it's something that's changed over the years. I think when I was younger, it was a very external variable. It was a very like, have I finished a novel? Have I published a novel? Have I published 4 novels? Have I done this? Have I done that? I think as I've gotten older and I have done those things and I've realized I still don't feel mastery, I've realized that it's much more an internal uh, gauge that I have to measure by. And so, as I was thinking about while you were talking and while Melody was talking, mastery for me is very simply confidence and confidence in my skill set. Confidence is not arrogance. Arrogance is thinking that everything you do is great and you don't have anything to learn. Confidence to me is the ability to get down on the page what I want to say, the story I want to tell in a way that I want to tell it, while acknowledging that there's hurdles, there's growth, there's more to learn, there's always more to learn, there's more things I want to do, but that I can at least do that much. And I think I'm edging up on that feeling. Um, Again, it's kind of using going back to the amateur athlete, it's the personal best is always changing. You hit one bar, then you want to go to the next one, but also you're getting older and you might get injured and your goals might change. You might not care about marathons, whatever, flog that analogy down. But to me, it has changed. A lot of my goals have changed over the years. And so I just, having that confidence is both the goal and the daily practice.
Hmm.
Mm,
Thank you for seeing that the definition of mastery doesn't always have to include external things. It's easy for us to say, okay, I'll feel like a writer when, or,
Mhm.
I'll feel like I'm, whatever when I've done X, but that you use the word internal gauge, that it is just as, and maybe more important, to have that internal gauge, and a way to tap into that feeling of mastery, than simply to use external measurements.
Yeah. And I get the value of external measurements. I'm not trying to say that that's not important. Good writing, good editing, understanding story structure, finishing your first novel, publishing your first story if that's what you want to do. Those are all very helpful, but I've learned that the internal gauge is the one that I need to really look at, because the external ones are always going to fall apart at some point.
Well, and I would argue that, in the long run, if someone is going to make writing an integral part of their life for the rest of their life,
Mm,
that internal gauge is probably going to be a more reliable one.
good point.
Because if you can keep an eye on that barometer and have that feeling of confidence, or however you want to define that feeling of mastery, regardless of what's going on in the exterior world, then you can still always tap into that. If the only measurement you have is what's going on in the environment, what's going on around you, a lot of which you can't control,
Mm,
Mhm.
then there will always be places where you're going to feel like the mastery is completely falling apart, that things are not working.
Mhm. Or if you're trying to live by someone else's definition
mm,
of mastery.
Yes.
yes,
Yes.
yes, very true. Because that will ruin you if you try to do it.
Mm.
It can ruin you. It can be helpful, but it can be ruinous. Uh, Gina, it does bring up the point that I think I want to. I'm going to throw a question at you. This is yielding to mastery. It's the why and creativity. We
Mhm.
are running around to the end of this, creative quest cycle of guideposts. But as you often say, these guideposts aren't linear. And so I would really like to see, or hear, I should say, your thoughts on yielding to mastery in conjunction with some of the other stages that you might find yourself circling back around, and how that can affect your self perceptions of mastery, I guess.
Mhm. Very good question. So, as you noted, this is not a linear path. We've talked about these guideposts in a particular order just because we have to have some order, right? But you, as the listener, and each of you two as writers, may not experience them in the same order that we've discussed them in. Additionally, any one of us may repeat any one of these particular guideposts. And what I've recognized in certain different writers is that oftentimes a single writer will have one that they really need to work on. And so, they may repeat it over and over and over again before they get to the point where that particular guidepost is no longer a hurdle for them. In terms of mastery, I can see a relationship between this one and one we talked very early on in the process of emulating and mirroring. And if you've listened to that episode, you might remember that that is a very, very much a muscle building and sort of training beginner's mind stage. To go back to your metaphor of the athlete, it's that training stage, but it's when we're learning and we're absorbing. And so at that stage, we may not even be able to define what mastery looks like for us. We will probably be looking to those mentors and teachers and other people to see how they have defined mastery and how we view them in terms of mastery. in order to define our own. And I think that that's a good stage to start gathering that sort of input, if you will, for what mastery could look like for you.
Hmm.
The stages of assessing and acknowledging and verifying and testing, both of those two stages are similar in certain aspects, in terms of like evaluating where you are now as a writer. And
Mhm.
again, I think that is a very relevant stage at which to go, okay, here's how I'm going to define mastery, at least for now. Because I do think your definition of mastery, if you are writing over time, is gonna change.
Hmm.
So those are some that I particularly see in terms of being related to mastery and where you can start kind of cultivating what the picture of mastery looks like for you.
And can I just add along with that, as I see it in the creativity cycle, as well as the 5 seasons of the writing process, and it's not, to obtain perfect balance in each season, but more to the self-awareness of where you are at any given time, and the ability to move from one season to the next, from one stage to the next, as you need it, because that's what life is. It's about flow and movement and growth at all times. And so never being over focused or stuck in any one place, but the
Mhm.
ability to move is what um, I feel mastery is about. And it's also what builds our resilience
Hmm.
and our ability to reach new levels of mastery as we go along.
Matt, one thing that's not discussed enough, just in general, is that mastery, true mastery, in my opinion, requires flexibility. It's when you are super rigid about your values or your goals, things break. Like rigidity leads to uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Fragility leads to like things breaking.
Br-
To
Brittleness.
Death.
brittleness. That was the word. Death is another one. Sure, okay, we're gonna
Yeah.
get there. Then all right, go all the way. Uh, but I think in our society, a lot of times, mastery is held up as this perfection of attainment. And what we're talking really about is the idea of constant learning as opposed to
Yes.
that flexibility learning. That's why I think when I think about it now, that's kind of where I think I get my confidence angle on it. It's that I've learned a lot, so I know I can learn more.
Mm, beautiful. There's this sort of balance that needs to take place between. So we talk about being in a stage or a phase, and that sometimes we think we're stuck when what we really need to do is just sit in that phase for a while.
Mm, mm,
And then there are times when we need to and want to be propelled forward and have that movement that Melody was talking about. But sometimes we try to control the situation and move ourselves faster than we're really ready to go. So, to me, in this moment, what true mastery means to me is being able to discern between stuckness and needing to stay in a place and movement that I'm ready for, or movement that I'm trying to force.
Mhm.
So if I can discern between those things so that I know when I maybe need to learn something new,
mhm,
or I'm ready to put myself out there in a way that I've never done before, if I can discern between stuckness and sitting, because I'm supposed to sit, and movement that is forced or necessary, then
mm.
I will feel like I've reached some sort of mastery, not only in my writing, but in my life.
That's pretty profound, Gina. That's pretty
It
profound.
is. And it's a question I challenge myself with a lot of times because of this mindset we have in our culture about productivity, doing all the time,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
never breaking a rest. So I don't, it, I am challenged to allow myself the periods of rest to take a break. And somebody asked me once, how do you know if you just need a break or if you're stuck? And and my answer to that is you'll know it on the inside when you give yourself permission to take that break without any judgment. You will feel calm and at peace with it.
Mm.
And the
Uh-huh.
stuckness is got that inner disquiet. It feels like, there's not movement and there should be.
Yeah.
And
Discomfort.
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. It's reminded of the phrase I saw floating around on the internet, a meme or whatever somewhere, but um, it's not laziness if you're bored. Because the I yeah, right? Because if you're being restful on purpose, then you're not bored, and then you're doing something for a reason. But if you're if you're bored, then it's not laziness because you want to be doing something. It's that disquiet, right? So you're bored, you're like, I want to be doing something. That's not laziness. That's your brain telling you it's ready to do something else. You may just not know yet. So I
Mm.
thought of that when you were talking about like the inner disquiet and the difference between sitting versus being stuck. And it was like,
mhm.
yeah, that's the inner
I
feeling. It's how you feel about it.
absolutely. And I like that because we're taught that, or we somehow internalize that there's something wrong if we're bored.
Mm-hmm.
And I read recently, like, no, there's nothing wrong if you're bored. That's part of they didn't call it inner disquiet, but it's sort of like that space that is right before something creative happens.
Right.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Very interesting.
So since this is all about writing, I do want to suggest that to discern that energy that Melody was talking about that you can feel to identify the difference between the sort of stuckness and the sitting where you need to be sitting. I have found no better tool to really discern what that energy is than journaling. And I know
Mhm.
a lot of people resist the idea of journaling, but truthfully, it goes back to Joan Didion's quote again, you know? I write entirely to find out what I'm thinking and feeling. And if you know, journal about whatever that feeling is that you're having, then it will help you discern between whether it is, I am stuck and I need to find some way to get out of this stuckness, or I feel stuck, but I'm really sitting in a place where I need to sit for a while. And what is the reason that I need to be in this place?
And it's funny you should say that because I am one of those people. I resist journaling. I resist
Mhm.
it. I resist it. I don't I'm just like I'm not writing for an audience. I'm not writing for a purpose. I'm not telling a story. Why would I want to journal? And yet, every time I've actually sat down and made a practice of journaling on a regular basis, it has given me those insights. It has given me that
Mhm.
ability to have, like, not quite objective, right? Like we're always in our own brain,
Right.
but a little bit of a step back from the immediacy of what I'm feeling. And that's yeah. So thanks for calling me out,
And
Gina. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
well,
So
uh,
those
and,
insights that it leads you to can be the purpose.
Yeah. Yeah,
uh,
they are really.
and I just wanna add to that note is I'm one of those people also, I don't know if I resist journaling, but I'm not always inspired to journal. I
Mm,
enjoy it when I do it, but I do a lot of auditory journaling
mm,
with my good writer friends who allow me without judgment to talk it through and talk it out. And to me, um, that helps me get whatever is in out of me. And then I have clarity. And often I don't need somebody to give me advice. My good friends know that. they'll ask well-timed questions. But a lot of times I come to what I need to know just by talking it through with someone.
In
So,
my productivity coaching, there's the brain dump exercise, and it's
oh
not
yeah,
quite journaling, but it's the same principle of getting something out of your brain that's knocking around
yeah,
in there, making noise, and putting it down and getting it out of that space and putting it somewhere where you can actually
hmm,
look at it or listen to it or get feedback on it, depending on how you're doing it. So critical.
Interesting that back in episode 40, when we were talking about trusting the process and being
Mm,
3 feet from gold, that we touched also on the idea of, having that support group to talk through things with to help us
mhm,
really kind of understand where we
hmm,
are and just think through things as we
absolutely.
talk it out.
mm,
Your
mm.
community is so important, even if
Very much
it's a
so.
community of two. It's really important.
And oftentimes I think that even when we are not feeling like masters,
Mm,
even when we're not sitting in that space of mastery, we don't feel like we can approach that our support system can remind us that we probably are.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's true.
absolutely.
That's true.
And they often do.
Yes. So we're going to be talking about yielding to mastery one more time when we talk with Melody in depth about the seasons of the writing process in our next episode. So we'll have a worksheet for yielding to mastery in the show notes underneath this on our website, which is aroundthewriterstable.com. Anything else you ladies want to add about this stage before we wrap things up?
Mm. No, I think I've been called out on journaling, so, accomplishment achieved there, but no, I think this has been a really
Yeah.
insightful episode for me as well to get me to thinking about what is my internal gauge? How am I judging that?
Mhm.
How am I making those calls?
Yeah,
Great.
it's a call to more self-awareness is what I'm realizing.
Darn
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
ugh, why?
Yes. Oh, I love that. Okay, I'm making notes here,
Mm.
because I'm still gonna be refining and developing and writing about and talking about these,
Mhm,
stages in
mhm.
the creativity quest for quite a while. So, like I said, we do have one more episode related to yielding to mastery, and then we're gonna do a wrap up of the full cycle. And then this summer, we're moving on to more interviews like the one we recently did with Rhett Devane. And you'll hear from each one of us interviewing some of our favorite writers. So I look forward to that. And thank you for being here, ladies.
Thank you so much, y'all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for joining us around the writer's table. Please feel free to suggest a topic or a guest by emailing info@aroundthewriterstable.com. Music provided with gracious permission by Langtree. A link to their music is on our homepage at aroundthewriterstable.com. Everyone here around the writer's table wishes you joy in your writing and everyday grace in your living. Take care until next time.